I stood there, utterly drenched, the once pristine white of my engagement dress now plastered against my skin, as my future mother-in-law's voice cut through the stunned silence. "He's marrying someone else," she declared, her voice dripping with venom. 50 guests, decked out in their finest attire, watched in morbid fascination as she sneered, branding me a gold digger before tossing a glass of ice water in my face. The icy shock was nothing compared to the searing humiliation. She thought she had won, that she had broken me. But then, as if orchestrated by fate itself, the ballroom doors swung open, and Karma, in the form of my brother, walked in wearing a suit that probably cost more than her entire jewelry collection. Before I plunge you into this tale of revenge, a story so satisfying it will leave you breathless, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this ridiculously entitled family got exactly what they deserved. Now, let me rewind and tell you how what started as the worst day of my life turned into the most incredible turning point. My name is Nova, and 3 years ago, I genuinely believed I'd found my soulmate. His name was Damien Sterling. Yes, that Sterling, of the Sterling real estate empire. The irony is, when I first met him at an art gallery opening, I was blissfully ignorant of his family's wealth and status. He was just this incredibly charming, down-to-earth guy who, to my surprise, actually understood why I spent a good 20 minutes captivated by an abstract painting that looked like a toddler had attacked a canvas with finger paints. We talked for hours that night, about art, about life, about everything and nothing. And for the first time I felt truly seen, truly understood. I'm a graphic designer. Nothing flashy, nothing glamorous. I work from my cozy, albeit small, apartment, fueled by copious amounts of coffee, and have a tendency to lose all track of time when I'm immersed in a project I'm passionate about. My life was simple, unpretentious, and I genuinely loved it. Damien seemed to appreciate that about me. He'd surprise me by showing up at my doorstep with takeout from my favorite Thai place, content to sit on my floor while I worked, telling me I was the most authentic person he'd ever met. For 3 years we built what I believed was a beautiful, solid relationship. Or at least that's what I thought. The proposal was straight out of a movie scene, on a rooftop restaurant overlooking the twinkling city lights. Damien got down on one knee, a velvet box in his hand, and I swear my heart skipped a beat. The ring was exquisite, a simple yet breathtaking diamond that caught the light like a captured star. I blurted out yes, before he could even finish the question. That night, wrapped in his arms, basking in the afterglow of our engagement, he promised me that his family would love me just as much as he did. I should have known better. I should have seen the flicker of hesitation in his eyes when he said those words. Meeting Margaret Sterling was like stepping into a walk-in freezer. The woman appraised me the way one would examine a suspicious stain on an expensive Persian rug, with thinly veiled disgust and the immediate desire to have it removed. Their mansion was colossal, sterile, and filled with portraits of severe-looking ancestors who seemed to be silently judging me from their ornate, gilded frames. Margaret circled me like a predator, making subtle jabs about my quaint little career, and firing pointed questions about my family background, digging for any dirt she could find. She kept bringing up someone named Amelia Whitmore, going on and on about what a lovely girl from such a respectable family she was. Damien barely said a word in my defense. He just kept trying to steer the conversation elsewhere, looking increasingly uncomfortable and agitated. That should have been my first blaring red flag, but love, or perhaps infatuation, has a way of blinding you to the obvious, doesn't it? I foolishly convinced myself that Margaret just needed time to warm up to me, that I could win her over. I was so naive. After that excruciating dinner, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease, the image of Amelia Whitmore swirling in my mind. So, I did what any modern woman with access to the internet would do. I Googled her. And there she was, picture perfect in every way that seemed to matter to people like Margaret. Old money, impeccable social connections, and a face that could grace the cover of any magazine. But what really made my stomach plummet were the photos I found of her and Damien together from years ago. They looked like the quintessential power couple, the kind you see splashed across the pages of glossy society magazines. When I confronted Damien about it, he sighed dramatically, acting as if I was being completely unreasonable. He reluctantly admitted that they had dated briefly, said his mother had never quite gotten over their breakup, but swore that Amelia meant absolutely nothing to him now. He took my face in his hands, looked me directly in the eyes, and promised me that I was the one he wanted, that I was his future. And like a complete and utter fool, I believed him. I so desperately wanted to believe him. 2 weeks later, I received a call from Margaret. Her voice was syrupy sweet, almost sickeningly so. She said she wanted to make amends for her previous behavior by throwing us an engagement party, a chance for her to properly welcome me into the family. She claimed she'd been reflecting on her behavior and wanted to start fresh. Every instinct I possessed screamed that this was a trap, that something was terribly wrong, but Damien was so overjoyed, so convinced that it meant his mother was finally accepting me, that I caved in. I agreed, ignoring the gnawing knot of dread that had taken root in my stomach. Margaret insisted on controlling every single detail of the party. The venue, the guest list, the floral arrangements, even what I would wear. A few days later, a dress was delivered to my apartment. A white engagement dress that looked like it had been plucked straight out of a period drama. It was undeniably beautiful in a traditional, conservative way, but it wasn't me at all. It felt like a costume, a disguise. When I tentatively suggested wearing something else, Margaret's saccharine tone turned sharp and icy. She said that this was what Sterling brides wore, and if I wanted to be part of the family, I needed to respect their traditions. Damien, predictably, backed her up, so I reluctantly agreed to wear the dress, suppressing my growing unease. The morning of the party, I tried calling Damien at least a dozen times. Every call went straight to voicemail. I sent him text messages, asking if he was okay, telling him I was feeling nervous and anxious. Nothing. By the time I arrived at the opulent hotel where the party was being held, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I walked into that ballroom alone, and instantly felt like I'd stumbled into a different dimension. The room was teeming with people who looked like they had been plucked straight from the pages of a fashion magazine. Diamonds the size of grapes, designer dresses that probably cost more than my apartment, and conversations revolving around vacation homes in the Hamptons and exclusive charity galas. I felt acutely out of place, painfully small in that white dress that suddenly felt less like a symbol of celebration and more like a target painted on my back. Margaret spotted me immediately and glided over with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She kissed my cheek, the gesture feeling cold and insincere, and told me to wait at a small table near the side of the room. Just wait, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We'll start soon. That's when I saw Amelia. She was across the room in a breathtaking red dress that screamed power and confidence, laughing with guests and acting completely at ease, like she owned the place, like she belonged there. My chest constricted with a wave of panic. I desperately tried to catch Damien's eye. I could see him now, standing near the bar talking to his father, but he pointedly avoided looking in my direction. He kept his eyes downcast, his shoulders tense and rigid. Something was very, very wrong. Margaret walked to the front of the room and tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the ballroom. The crowd quieted down, champagne glasses raised in anticipation. I stood up, smoothing down my dress, trying to calm my racing heart. This was it. Our engagement announcement, our celebration. Thank you all for coming. Margaret's voice rang out, bright and cheerful. We're here to celebrate an engagement. I started to move forward, instinctively expecting to be called up to the front. I'm absolutely thrilled to announce the engagement of my son, Damien, to the wonderful Amelia Whitmore. The room erupted in thunderous applause. My legs simply stopped working. I stood there, frozen in place, as Damien walked to the center of the room with Amelia on his arm. She was beaming, radiant with triumph. He looked deeply uncomfortable, but he didn't stop, didn't protest, didn't even spare me a glance. The applause continued, deafening, relentless, and I felt like I was submerged underwater, drowning, while everyone else breathed effortlessly. I don't remember consciously walking toward them. I just remember suddenly being there, standing directly in front of Damien, my voice barely a whisper. What is this? Damien, what's happening? He finally looked at me, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, guilt, maybe, but also a cold, calculating resignation, as if he'd already made his choice and I was just an inconvenient problem that needed to be dealt with. Before he could answer, Margaret materialized between us, her face a mask of icy contempt. 2 security guards appeared at her silent signal, effectively blocking my path. Did you really think my son would marry a nobody like you? Her voice was loud now, sharp, deliberately cutting through the confused murmurings of the crowd. She wanted everyone to hear. This girl has been stalking my son, claiming to be his fiancé. I felt the room tilt and sway around me. Phones came out recording the scene. Whispers grew louder, more insistent. Margaret continued her tirade, her voice rising with manufactured outrage. She pulled out papers, waving them in the air. Evidence, she declared, claiming I'd been harassing their family for money, painting me as some delusional stalker who had fabricated an entire relationship. I tried to speak, to defend myself, but my voice came out broken and weak. I have a ring. I held up my hand, the diamond catching the light, a desperate plea for validation. Damien proposed to me. We've been together for 3 years. My voice was shaking, tears streaming down my face now. I hated that I was crying, hated that they were seeing me break. Margaret laughed, actually laughed, a harsh, cruel sound that echoed through the ballroom. That ring? It's costume jewelry, dear. Did you actually think it was real? She turned to the crowd, playing them like a captive audience. Can you imagine? She probably bought it herself to make her delusion more convincing. That's when Damien spoke. Finally, after all this, he opened his mouth and shattered the remnants of my heart. Nova, I'm sorry. We were never serious. You misunderstood what we had. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion, like he was reading from a script. He practiced this. They'd planned this together. Everything clicked into place. The ignored calls, the turned off phone, Margaret's sudden, saccharine kindness, the white dress that made me look innocent and foolish. This was a setup, a meticulously planned public execution designed to humiliate me so completely that I'd never dare challenge them, and Damien had been complicit from the start. I loved you, I whispered, and I hated how pathetic and broken I sounded. I thought you loved me. Margaret's face twisted with disgust. Love? Girls like you don't know love. You know opportunity. You know how to spot a wealthy man and sink your claws in. She turned to Amelia, who was watching the scene unfold with cruel amusement. Look at her in that dress, like a child playing dress-up. It's embarrassing, really. Amelia's voice was sugar-sweet poison. Did you actually think you belonged here with people like us? The crowd was fully turned against me now. I could see it in their faces. Judgment, pity, contempt. Some were openly laughing, snapping photos, recording videos of my humiliation. I tried to hold on to my dignity, tried to stand tall even as my world crumbled around me. I loved you, Damien. I repeated, my voice cracking. I thought you loved me. I guess I was wrong about everything. Margaret signaled to a waiter who hurried over with a crystal pitcher of ice water. Let me help you cool down from this delusion, she said, and before I could process what was happening, she flung the entire pitcher at me. The ice water hit me like a physical blow. The white dress became completely transparent, clinging to my skin. My makeup ran in black streaks down my face. The cold was shocking, but not nearly as shocking as the sound that filled the room. A cacophony of gasps mixed with cruel laughter. People were actually laughing at me, documenting my humiliation for their social media feeds. Margaret's final blow came with a dismissive wave of her hand. Security, remove this gold-digging trash from my party. The security guards moved toward me, their faces impassive, and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This was it, the absolute lowest moment of my life. I was going to be dragged out of here, soaking wet and humiliated, while they all watched and laughed. Then, as if summoned by divine intervention, the ballroom doors burst open with a dramatic crash. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot, and suddenly everyone was silent, their attention diverted from my public shaming. I turned, along with everyone else, to see who had dared to interrupt Margaret's moment of triumph. A man walked in, and I swear the very atmosphere in the room shifted. He commanded attention without saying a word, his presence radiating an aura of power and authority. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored gray suit, flanked by 2 assistants and a woman carrying a sleek leather briefcase who was clearly an attorney. It took me a few seconds to process what I was seeing through my blurry, tear-filled vision. Then my heart nearly stopped. Adrian, my brother Adrian, who was supposed to be in Singapore closing a multi-million-dollar business deal. Adrian, who I hadn't even told about the engagement party because I didn't want to bother him. Adrian, who looked absolutely furious in that terrifying way where he doesn't raise his voice or show any emotion at all. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the scene, and landed on me, soaking wet, shivering, surrounded by security guards, wearing a see-through dress that left nothing to the imagination. I saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands clench into fists before he visibly composed himself. Then he walked straight toward me, ignoring every single person who tried to get his attention. Whispers rippled through the crowd. That's Adrian Hayes. The Adrian Hayes. Oh my God. Adrian reached me and immediately removed his suit jacket, carefully draping it around my shoulders. His hands were gentle, but his voice was steel. I'm sorry I'm late, Nova. Traffic from the airport. He said it as if we'd planned this all along, as if he was just running a few minutes behind for a normal family dinner. I watched Margaret's face drain of all color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She'd recognized him. Everyone had. Adrian Hayes, billionaire tech mogul, venture capitalist, the man whose investments could make or break entire companies. And he had just called me his sister. Margaret rushed forward, her entire demeanor transformed. The cruelty and arrogance were gone, replaced by desperate sweetness. Mr. Hayes, what an unexpected honor. I didn't realize that Nova was. She couldn't even finish the sentence. Adrian cut her off with a single, withering look that could freeze hell over. You didn't realize my sister was worth your basic human decency? His voice was quiet, almost conversational, which somehow made it even more terrifying. He turned to address the room, his gaze sweeping over the stunned faces. I apologize for interrupting this celebration. I came to surprise my little sister at her engagement party. Although it seems there's been some confusion about who's getting engaged. The attorney stepped forward, opening her briefcase with a snap. We have text messages between Damian Sterling and Nova Hayes, spanning 3 years. We have receipts for an authentic 5-carat diamond engagement ring purchased by Mr. Sterling for $85,000. We have restaurant reservations, travel bookings, and lease agreements for an apartment they shared. She connected her tablet to the venue's projection screen, and suddenly the wall was filled with irrefutable evidence. Photos of Damian and me together, screenshots of his messages telling me he loved me, couldn't wait to marry me, that I was his everything. Restaurant reservations for anniversaries, plane tickets for trips we'd taken together, our names on a lease agreement, every piece of proof that our relationship was real, that I wasn't delusional or a stalker, that they were the liars. Margaret and Damian looked like they'd been slapped across the face. Amelia had gone completely pale, backing away from Damian as if he were radioactive. The crowd's energy shifted again. Now they were looking at the Sterlings with suspicion and open disgust. Adrian continued, his voice still eerily calm and controlled. Margaret Sterling, your family's company has been seeking investment for your downtown development project, the Sterling Tower complex on 5th Avenue. Margaret's eyes widened in horror. She hadn't known Adrian was involved with that deal. My venture capital firm was your primary potential investor, a $500 million deal. I could see the exact moment it hit her, the chilling realization of what she had just destroyed. Her hand flew to her throat as if she were struggling to breathe. Adrian emphasized, the word hanging in the air like a death sentence. As of 10 minutes ago, I personally called every major investor in the city. I explained how the Sterling family treats people, how they publicly humiliate and defraud innocent women for sport. Your project is dead, Margaret. No one will touch it. Damian's father, who had been silent throughout the entire ordeal, made a strangled, choking sound. I saw him grab the back of a chair to steady himself. That project was their company's future. Without it, they were financially ruined. But Adrian wasn't finished. He turned his attention to Amelia, who had been desperately trying to slip away unnoticed. Miss Whitmore, your family's pharmaceutical company recently applied for FDA approval on a new drug, a very lucrative approval that would be worth billions. Amelia froze in her tracks, her face contorted with fear. My sister sits on the advisory board that makes recommendations to the FDA. I wonder what they'd think about someone who participated in public harassment and defamation. Amelia started to stammer, to protest, to deny any involvement, but Adrian's attorney coolly pressed play on another recording. Suddenly, the room was filled with audio. Amelia and Margaret's voices, recorded days ago, plotting and scheming, discussing how to destroy that nobody, and teach her a lesson she'd never forget, talking about humiliating me so thoroughly that I'd never dare show my face in their circles again. Amelia let out a choked sob and literally ran from the room, her reputation in tatters. Adrian stepped back then, giving me space, giving me the floor, and despite everything, despite being soaking wet, humiliated, and heartbroken, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was standing in a room full of people who had judged me, laughed at me, and found me wanting. And now they knew the truth. I looked at all of them, these people in their expensive clothes with their expensive jewelry and their cheap, cruel hearts. You all watched this happen? I said, my voice surprisingly strong and steady. Some of you laughed. You judged me by my clothes, my job, my background. But not one of you asked if I was okay. Not one of you questioned whether this was right. I turned to Damian, who couldn't bring himself to meet my eyes. I loved you. That was real. Every moment we shared, every promise I made, that was real. But you were too weak to stand up to your mother. You humiliated me to please her. And that says everything about who you are. I removed the ring, that very real, very expensive ring, and placed it in his trembling hand. I hope Amelia enjoys being controlled by your mother. You two deserve each other. Then I looked directly at Margaret, and I let her see everything I felt, not just the hurt and betrayal, but the strength that was rising up within me. A phoenix rising from the ashes of her cruelty. You called me trash. You threw water on me like I was something to be washed away. But here's the thing, Margaret, trash floats, and I'm still standing. Margaret dropped to her knees. Actually dropped to her knees in front of everyone. Her designer dress pooling on the floor. Please, Mr. Hayes. This is all a misunderstanding. We can fix this. I'll apologize. We'll make it right. Please don't destroy our family. Adrian's response was pure ice. You should have thought about that before you threw water on my sister. You called her trash. You humiliated her publicly. You questioned her worth. Now the whole city knows what kind of family you really are. He paused, letting that sink in, and they'll remember. Damian's father finally found his voice, turning on Margaret with a fury I'd never seen from him before. What have you done? What have you done to this family? I took Adrian's arm, and together we walked toward the exit. The crowd parted like we were royalty, which I suppose in that moment we were. Nobody laughed now. Nobody smiled. They just watched with a mixture of shock and awe as we made our exit. Just before we stepped out of the ballroom, I turned back one last time. I pulled a receipt from my purse. The one from the jeweler that I'd kept as a memento. By the way, Margaret, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. This costume jewelry you were so amused by? Damien spent $85,000 on it. Guess he thought I was worth something after all. The silence behind us was deafening. That was 6 months ago. 6 months that completely and irrevocably changed the course of my life. The Sterling family's business empire crumbled within 3 months. Turns out, when you alienate one of the most powerful investors in the city, and when video of you publicly humiliating someone goes viral, people don't exactly line up to work with you anymore. Shocking, right? Damien and Amelia's engagement imploded after a mere 3 weeks. Apparently, being controlled by Margaret wasn't as appealing when there was no money or status to cushion the blow. Last I heard, Damien moved to Seattle to work for a mid-level marketing firm. A far cry from his previous life of privilege and luxury. Margaret became a social pariah. The same high society circles that once embraced her now actively avoid her, crossing the street to avoid a chance encounter. As for me, I thrived. I launched my own design studio, and it's been more successful than I ever dreamed. Turns out, being Adrian Hayes' sister opened some doors, but my talent and hard work are what kept them open. I'm happy now. Really, genuinely happy in a way I never was with Damien. That night broke me. Sure. But it also freed me from a life that was never truly meant for me. I learned that sometimes the worst betrayals can lead to the most incredible transformations. I learned that people will always show you who they really are if you give them enough rope. And, most importantly, I learned that I never needed the approval of people like Margaret Sterling. I never needed to prove my worth to people who were incapable of seeing it in the first place. Adrian didn't just rescue me that night. He reminded me of who I really am. Someone who never needed their validation in the first place. And that's how a glass of ice water washed away my fake life and revealed my real power. If the story gave you chills, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Subscribe for more stories about karma, revenge, and standing up for yourself. Remember, never let anyone make you feel small, because you might just be related to a giant. I'm Nova, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay powerful.